Cool, so I've now rebooted back into Lubuntu, and I've been prompted by this update notifier telling me that I have packages to install and to upgrade. So if I maximize this notifier, I can open up these drop down menus, and these are all the different packages that will be installed or actually updated. So all I'll do is I'll click apply and then throw in the old password. And there we go, it's now running the upgrade. So I'll speed up this bit of the video and then I'll rejoin you as soon as this has completed. Now, as you can see, I actually had some errors, and that was due to my internet connection apparently not being connected, but I believe I am connected, so I'll close out of there and I'll actually run the command using the terminal. So Control-Alt-T. But before I do that, I'm actually going to do a little tweak in my terminal so that I get feedback when I enter my password. So I'll get the little asterisks to show that I'm actually entering my password. So to do that, just type in sudo visudo and then press enter, enter your password. And so now what I want to do is go down to this lot of defaults instructions here, and I want to create a new line. So I'll just create a new line and then type in defaults and then tab and then type in pw feedback. Cool, so that's done. So I'll Control-O to write and then enter to write the file, and that's done. So now I can exit, so Control-X to exit. And what I'll do is I'll actually close and reopen my terminal window. So I'll close that and then Control-Alt-T to open. And then sudo apt update -y and sudo apt upgrade -y and sudo apt auto remove -y. So now I'll press return and then enter my password, and hopefully this time it will complete. Cool, I'm back from the reboot. So what I'm going to do next is address an issue that many MacBooks may experience. Now, a lot of older MacBooks actually have issues trying to connect using Wi-Fi. So currently I'm connected using a cable, but my Wi-Fi currently doesn't work. So if I go to my network icon and right click that, as you can see, Wi-Fi is enabled. But if I click it again, as you can see, the Wi-Fi networks don't appear, and that is because the Wi-Fi card that I have in this computer doesn't actually work. So what I'm going to do now is actually install a driver for it, and so this Wi-Fi fix that I'm about to do is only applicable to laptops that have a Broadcom wireless card. And also to do the fix, I also have to be able to connect to the internet. So luckily I do have an Ethernet cable plugged in, so let's do the fix. So the first thing to do is open up a terminal window, so Control-Alt-T. And so firstly, I actually want to identify what type of wireless card I have in my computer. So to do that, run the command lspci, which is list PCI, then space -nn space -d space 14E4, then colon. Right, so I'll press return now. And so what I want to take note of is this here, 432B revision 1. So now that I know what type of wireless controller I have in my computer, I'm going to jump online. So I'll open up Firefox. And that took a wee while to open up because this version of Firefox is a snap package, but we'll address this a bit later. So what I want to do is go to askubuntu.com. So askubuntu.com. and I'll quickly customize the settings. And then in the search bar, do a search for installing Broadcom wireless drivers. And so this first link here is what I want to click, so I'll go to that page there. And if you scroll down this page here, this answer here, the introduction and background, contains the instructions that I'll be able to use to fix my Wi-Fi problems. Now, as you can see, this answer is based on extensive research done by Ubuntu users that work together in almost all issues related to Broadcom. Special thanks to Chili555 who helped in the Ubuntu forums. And if I scroll down here, I'll also give a shout out to Luis Alvarado, who posted this answer on the Ask Ubuntu forums. Cool, so I'll just scroll back up here and start this process. So if I scroll down here, here are the instructions. So starting from number 1, knowing what Broadcom wireless card you have. Actually what I'll do is I'll tile this page so I can actually see it alongside my terminal. So there we go, and I'll grab my terminal. And currently I don't have any tiling shortcuts in Lubuntu, but that's okay. It's easy enough just to click and drag. Cool, so if I scroll down this page again to number 1, which is knowing what Broadcom wireless card you have, and I've already put in the instruction, which is this one here, to find out that I'm using the 432B Rev 1 card. Cool, so I'll now scroll down this page a bit more. And you'll see a note here. So if you've actually attempted to fix your wireless card and you've installed any type of driver and it hasn't worked or anything like that, you want to actually follow this instruction here, sudo apt-get purge, to actually purge your system of any pre-installed drivers that may be wrong. But if you're running from a fresh install, then you can bypass this instruction here and go straight to prepare the system. So what I want to do is run an update, so I'll do that first. Sudo apt update -y, enter. And that's completed. So what I want to do next is update the Ubuntu list of PCI IDs by running this command here, sudo update PCI IDs. So I'll run that now, sudo update -PCI IDs. Press enter. And that's done. Cool, so I'll scroll down this page here again, and now I'm up to number 3. So this is how to install the package if you have an Ethernet connection connected. So what I want to do is scroll down this page here to this list, and I'll expand this page so we can see what's going on properly. And I'll scroll up to the list again, so there it is there. So what I have in my computer is this one here, the 14E4432B. As you can see here, 14E4432B, revision 1. So in this list here it is here, 14E4432B. And because it's revision 1, there's no revision version here. So what I want to do is copy this line here, Control-C to copy, and then if I scroll back up the page, I actually want to install that. So I'll tile the page again and then jump back into my terminal and I'll run the install. So sudo apt install, Control-Shift-V to paste that line, and then press enter. So that's now installing that, and then enter for yes, and off we go. So if I go back to the Ask Ubuntu website, and I'll just scroll down to find the list again. So if you had any of these Broadcom cards, then you'd run sudo apt install followed by firmware b43 installer with hyphens between the words. And for example, if you had any of these cards, the 14E4331 or the 4335 or the 4350, then you'd run sudo apt install firmware b43 installer. So that's pretty much how to use the chart. So I'll scroll back up this page here. And then let's see how we're going in the terminal. And that has completed. So now what I want to do is install this package here, the Linux firmware package. So I just have to run this instruction here, which is sudo apt install Linux firmware. So I'll go back to my terminal window and run the command sudo apt install Linux -firmware. Press enter. And that has completed. So now what I'll do is I'll reboot the computer and then rejoin you on the other side of the reboot. And here I am back from the reboot. So now if I jump over to my network manager and click that, there we go. As you can see here, now I have working Wi-Fi, which is absolutely brilliant. But because I'm using an Ethernet cable, I'll actually turn off my Wi-Fi. So I'll right click and then deselect enable Wi-Fi, and I'll just check that. There we go, I've turned Wi-Fi off, and that's my Wi-Fi now fixed. Cool, so what I'll do next is actually turn on my firewall. Now in Lubuntu, Uncomplicated Firewall, or UFW, is already pre-installed. However, there's no graphic user interface for it, so what I'm going to do now is actually install a graphical user interface to allow me to really easily manage my firewall. So to do that, I'll open up a terminal window, Control-Alt-T, and then run the command sudo apt install, followed by gufw. So that is the graphical Uncomplicated Firewall, and then I'll just pop in a yes, press return, and this should actually be pretty quick to install. And that has completed, so I'll exit out of the terminal window and then jump into my apps menu and do a search for UFW, and there we go, that's the firewall configuration. So I'll open that by pressing enter and then enter my password, and now I can easily turn on and manage my firewall. So I'll switch it on here, and that's pretty much all there is to it. It really is uncomplicated. Now if you wanted to actually create rules, then you'd click here and then add a rule here, and this is to allow any of your apps through the firewall, but just by turning on the status to on, that will usually suffice. Cool, so I'll close out of there. Now, one of the awesome things about MacBooks is having a backlit keyboard. Now, currently my keyboard is not actually backlit. So what I'm going to do now is install a package to allow my keyboard to be backlit. So what I'll do is I'll jump into my apps menu and then go up to System Tools, and I want to open this Muon Package Manager. So this is very similar to Synaptic Package Manager if you're used to using that. So what I want to do is do a search for Pommed, or Pommed. Here it is here. And so what I want to do is select the first one, Pommed, and then right click, mark for installation, and then OK to mark the additional changes, and then press apply changes. Enter my password, and this should be pretty quick to install as well. Fantastic, that's completed. As you can see here, it's installed. So I'll close out of the Muon Package Manager, and let's see if I have keyboard backlight. It's actually not working yet, so what I'm going to do is reboot the computer again, and then I'll have a backlit keyboard. Now, one of the issues that many people have with Lubuntu, and Ubuntu I believe as well, is that Snap applications are pre-installed by default. So for example, if I jump into my apps menu and then go up to System Tools and then open my Discover, which is my software center, and I'll just move this to the left a little bit, and if I do a search for an application, so for example Firefox, and then scroll down this list, as you can see, Firefox is installed because it says remove. Anything that says remove basically means that it's already installed. But as you can see here, this is actually the Snappak version of Firefox. Now don't get me wrong, there are benefits to running Snappaks in your system. One of the really cool benefits is that snaps actually run in a sandbox, so they're isolated from the rest of your system. However, if you have a lower spec machine like I have, then you may find that snaps run a lot slower than, say, the deb packages that you'd normally use. So this next step is completely optional, but what I'm going to do is actually remove Snappaks from my computer, and then if I do a search in my Discover Software Center, then I won't actually be served up as part of the results any Snappaks. Cool, so what I'll do is I'll close out of Discover and then open up a terminal window, Control-Alt-T, and I'll just move this to the left a bit. And so firstly, what I want to do is actually find out what snaps I have installed on my machine. So to find out, just type in snap list. And there we go, I have Bear, Core 20, Firefox, GNOME 338 2004, GTK, Common Themes, and Snapped. So what I want to do is actually sequentially remove all of these. So the first thing that I'll remove is Firefox, and in the next step of the video I'll actually show you how to install Firefox as a deb package. So to remove each of these, firstly I'll start with Firefox. Type in sudo snap remove, followed by -- purge, because I want to actually completely clean my system of these snaps. And then space followed by the application name, which is of course Firefox. So I'll Control-Shift-C to copy and Control-Shift-V to paste, then press return. And this is now disconnecting and purging my system of the snap version of Firefox. So I'll speed up the video and then rejoin you as soon as this is completed. And that has completed. So next I'll remove the GTK Common Themes. So I'll copy that, Control-Shift-C to copy. And then rather than typing all this out, I'll just use my up arrow to go to the previous typed command. There we go. And then I'll remove Firefox and replace that with GTK Common Themes. So Control-Shift-V to paste and then return. And that's done. So next I'll remove the GNOME 338 2004. So I'll Control-Shift-C to copy and then use my up arrow to go to the previous command and replace GTK Common Themes, Control-Shift-V, with the GNOME 338 2004 package. Press enter. Cool, and then I'll use my up arrow to go to the previous command and delete that and replace it with Bear, which is the first package. So Bear, press return. That's done. Next I'll remove the Core 20. So I'll do the same again, replace Bear with Core 20. And then finally I'm going to remove Snapped. So I'll use my up arrow, replace that with Snapped, and then press return. And that's completed. So now what I want to do is actually delete the snapped daemon package. So to do that, I'll use my up arrow and then this time delete everything up until the hyphens and replace purge with auto remove space snapped. And instead of snap, it's actually meant to say apt. So I'll place that with apt. So sudo apt remove -- auto remove snapped, return. There we go. Return again for yes. And this will remove all traces of the snapped package. And that has completed. So now if I use my up arrow to go to the snap list command, there we go. As you can see, there are no snaps on my system anymore. Right, so now that I've removed all of these packages, I want to make sure that my system doesn't reinstall snap packages in the future. So to do that, I'm going to create a configuration file. So I'll run the command sudo nano, and that is for the nano editor, followed by /etc /apt /preferences.d /no snap.pref. Cool, so I'll press return, and this is the configuration file that I've just created. And so currently it's empty, so I'm going to type in a few commands. So firstly what I'll do is I'll type in a comment. So I'll start off with a hashtag space, and that means that this command that I'm typing in right now is commented out. It's not part of the instruction set. So I'll type in to prevent repository packages from triggering the installation of snap, and then a new line. And to continue the comment, I'll do another hashtag and then type in this file forbids snapped from being installed by apt, full stop. Cool, so that's just a comment so I know what this is, and then return, and then type in the actual command. So firstly I want to define the package, so package : snapped, press return again, and then type in pin : release a equals asterisk, and then return again, pin - priority space -10. Cool, so I'll write that out, Control O to write, and then enter to write the lines, and then Control X to exit. Cool, so now I'll run an update, so sudo apt update -y. Cool, so that has completed. Now, if I actually wanted to reverse this and install snap packs in the future, then what I'd do is I'd firstly remove this file here, the nosnap.pref file. So to do that, you would just replace nano, which would edit the configuration file, and you just type in rm space, and that will actually remove that package. And then once you've done that, then you'd reinstall the snap store. But I'm happy to continue on my system without snap packs installed, so I'll just exit out of the terminal, and we are done with snap packs. Cool, so if I jump into my apps menu, in the internet section, as you can see, Firefox is no longer installed. So what I want to do now is actually install Firefox as a deb package using apt. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll open up a terminal window. And so because I'm using Lubuntu, which is an Ubuntu based system, I'm actually going to add the Mozilla Team PPA. So to do that, just type in sudo add -apt -repository space PPA : Mozilla Team /PPA. So I'll press return and then enter again. And so now I have the PPA added. Now I'll actually install Firefox. So to do that, run the command sudo apt install -t space apostrophe (o) equals capital LP capital PPA Mozilla Team, and this is lowercase, apostrophe, then space, and then type in Firefox. Press enter to continue. And so I'll speed up this portion of the video and rejoin you as soon as it's completed. Cool, so the next step, I actually want to make sure that my Firefox deb package has a higher priority than the snap package, so that when I update my system, I don't inadvertently reinstall the snap pack of Firefox. So I actually want to make sure that when I do updates, it updates this PPA version. So to do that, I'm going to create another configuration file. So sudo nano /etc/apt/preferences .d /Mozilla Team PPA. Cool, so firstly I'll create a comment so I know what this file is, and I'll just type in ensures Firefox deb is updated. And then I'll go to a new line and type in package :Firefox asterisk, and then press return, type in pin : and so I want this to be the release lowercase o equals capital LP hyphen PPA in capitals hyphen Mozilla Team. And then to set the priority higher, go to a new line, type in pin hyphen priority : and then type in 501. Cool, and now I'll write this out. So Control O to write, Enter to apply the write, and then Control X to exit. Fantastic. So what I'll do now is run an update. So sudo apt update -y. And that has completed. So now if I go into my apps menu, in my internet category, here I have the deb version of Firefox. Right, now the very last step is I'll actually show you how to remove the repository if you didn't want to use the deb version. So you just go to your apps menu, go up to preferences, and then open your software sources, enter your password, and then go up to other software, and then all you have to do is select the PPA that you want to remove and then click the remove button. But I'm not going to remove it because I actually want to have this installed, so I'll close out of there, and now I have Firefox as a deb package installed on my Lubuntu system. Now in Lubuntu, if you wanted to play media files like MP3s, MPEGs, AVIs, etc., then you'll need to install some media codecs. Now Lubuntu doesn't actually pre-install these codecs due to copyright issues in some countries. So what I'll do now is actually install these codecs. So the package I'm going to install is called Ubuntu Restricted Extras, and the other cool thing about the Ubuntu Restricted Extras pack is that it also installs the default Microsoft TrueType fonts, which means that in your Ubuntu system you'll be able to edit documents that have been shared with you from people who are using a Microsoft system. So let's now install the Restricted Extras package. So I'll open up my terminal window, Control-Alt-T, and then type in the install command. So the command is sudo apt install ubuntu -restricted -extras. Cool, and I'll follow that with a -y for yes, and then press enter. And to click OK to the end user license agreement, I'll press Tab on my keyboard, and that's now selected OK, and then press return, and then use my arrow key to go over to yes to accept the EULA license terms. Press return, and that will now complete the install. So I'll speed up this bit of the video and rejoin you as soon as this has completed. And there we go, we are done. So I'll exit out of terminal. What I'm going to do next, if I jump into my apps menu and open up my Discover Package Manager. Now earlier I configured my Discover Package Manager to not serve up Flatpaks as part of the results. What I want to do now is actually integrate Flatpaks into the Discover app. So if I do a search for any applications, I actually get served up results that include Flatpaks, because there are some really cool Flatpaks out there. So what I'll do is I'll do a search for Discover Flatpak and Discover Flatpak backend. That's what I'll want to install. So I'll click install and then enter my password. Fantastic, that's completed. So I'll now close Discover and then reopen Discover. So that's in System Tools and Discover. And then go to Settings, click on that. And then go up to this button here that says Add FlatHub. So I'll click that. And then enter my password. And so that's now added the central repository of Flatpak applications. So now if I go back to my home button and then restart Discover, so I'll close that and then reopen it. And now if I do a search for a program like, for example, Blender, as you can see here, I have two versions of Blender. This is the Deb package, and this is, as you can see here, the Flatpak. So I've now integrated Flatpaks into my Discover Software Manager. Now, if I wanted to update Discover, just go down to this button down here. It actually says it's up to date, but if I click on that and then click refresh, it'll fetch the updates, and as you can see, my system is up to date. But if it wasn't, then I could just apply the updates in Discover. So I'll close out of there and we are done with Discover. Cool, so what I'm going to do next is actually update the version of the desktop environment that Lubuntu has, which is LXQt. So if I jump into my apps menu and then click on About LXQt, as you can see here, the current version that I have installed on my Lubuntu system, which is Lubuntu 22.04 LTS, is 0.17.0. Now there's actually been an updated version of LXQt that has been released, and it is version 1.1.0, and the latest version actually has a few extras that this version that comes pre-installed in Lubuntu doesn't actually have. So I actually want to upgrade my LXQt desktop environment version to 1.1.0. So to do that, I'll close out of About LXQt, open up a terminal window, Control-Alt-T. And so to actually install the newest version of LXQt, I actually have to add a repository first. So to add the repository, type in sudo add -apt -repository space ppa : and the name of the repository is Severus Septimius. And then /LXQt. So now if I press return and then enter my password, and as you can see here, LXQt 1.1. So now I'll just press enter to continue, and this will add the repository to my system. And that's completed. So now I'll do an update, sudo apt update -y, and this will include the Severus Septimius repository in my updates list. Cool, so the update's done. Now I'll upgrade, sudo apt upgrade -y, and then press return. So I'll just speed up this bit of the video. Oh, I actually have a visitor. I'll go and get the visitor. So I'll just speed up this bit of the video and rejoin you as soon as this has completed. You have anything to say? Cool, and now I'll do a cleanup by running the auto remove command. So sudo apt auto remove -y, and that has completed. So now I'll reboot the system, sudo reboot, and I'll see you on the other side of the reboot. Cool, so I'm back from the reboot. So now if I jump into my apps menu and click on about LXQt, as you can see here, I'm now running the 1.1.0 version of LXQt desktop on Lubuntu. Cool, so I'm back from the reboot, and what I'm going to do now is configure the LXQt settings. So I'm going to firstly jump into my apps menu and go up to Preferences, LXQt Settings, and then open the LXQt Configuration Center. And I'll maximize this window so I can see what's going on. And the very first thing I'll do is go to Desktop Notifications. So these are the notifications that occur up in the corner up here. So I'm going to change the default duration. I want it to actually disappear a bit quicker than 10 seconds. So I'm going to change that to 5 seconds and then press close. And next I'll go to the keyboard and mouse. And then in the left hand list I'll scroll down to the bottom and open the mouse and touchpad. Now because I'm using the touchpad on my laptop, I want to enable tap to click. So I'll apply that and then close. Next I'll go to the power management. And the battery that I currently have in this laptop is pretty old. It doesn't last very long. It lasts for like a minute, not even that. So I'm not going to worry about this when the power is low because I'll be using AC power when I use this laptop until I actually change the battery. But I will go to lid, and when I close the lid, on battery and on AC, I want this computer to go to suspend mode, and that is a lower power state. So if I did lose power, I can quickly close my lid, and hopefully the computer will kind of retain the settings until I can plug it in. And if I go over to power keys, the power key action is shut down. So when I press my power button on my laptop, it'll actually shut down, which is what I want. So I'll close out of there. Next I'll go to session settings, and then in auto start, these are all the apps that auto start when I boot up the computer. Now down here we have a clipper. That's this item here, which is the clipboard manager. Now I actually prefer not to use the clipboard manager because oftentimes I'll be copying and pasting passwords, so I don't want those passwords to be kept in the clipboard manager. So I'm actually going to firstly quit out of the clipboard manager or clipper, and then I'll disable the auto start. Cool, and I'll also go up here to snap user application, and I'll disable that as well because I'm no longer using snaps on this laptop. And that's pretty much it for the LXQt session settings. I'll close out of there now. And as you can see, some settings will not take effect until the next login. That's cool, so I'll OK to that. Next I'll go to shortcut keys. So if I open that, and this is where you can actually create shortcuts to launch applications. So I'll give you a demonstration on how this works. So either I can select an item and then modify it, or I can just add a new item. So I'll add a new item, and the shortcut for this, if I click in there, I've got 10 seconds to come up with a shortcut, but I actually have a standard shortcut that I always use, and this is to launch Firefox. So Alt Command F, and this is the same shortcut I use on all my laptops anyway. For the description, I'll type in Firefox, and then I'll select Command, and for the command, I'll type in Firefox. Cool, so then I'll OK to that, and let's test this out. Alt Command F, and this should launch Firefox. There we go, Firefox launched from that shortcut, which is great. So I'll close out of Firefox now, and I'll close the Global Actions Manager, otherwise known as Shortcut Keys. And because I'm using this laptop for audio work, I'm not going to worry about installing an NVIDIA driver. Actually, I don't even know if I have an NVIDIA driver. Let's try this out. Control-Alt-T, and I'll just run NeoFetch. Oh yeah, I do. I actually have the NVIDIA GeForce 9400M, but as I said, I'm using this MacBook for audio work, so I'm not going to worry about that because I'll be turning this kernel into a real-time kernel, which doesn't play well with NVIDIA cards, so I'll leave that as is. Cool, and next I'll go to Advanced Network Configuration, and I'll minimize the configuration center for the time being. You can access this network configurations just by going to your system tray and right-clicking the network icon and then selecting Edit Connections, and that also opens this Network Connections dialog. Cool, so what I'm going to do is actually change my DNS settings. So I'm going to use the Cloudflare DNS settings, and I'm also going to install the Google DNS settings as well, and that way I'll actually have my web pages served up faster when I'm web browsing, which although doesn't actually speed up your web browsing, it does make web browsing faster, if you kind of know what I mean. Cool, so I'll launch Firefox with my shortcut. And I'll actually tile this window to the right a bit. Cool, and in Firefox, I'll do a search for Google DNS servers. And here are the Google public DNS IP addresses, which are 8888 and 8844. So for this wired connection, I'll select that and then go to the settings cog. And firstly, I'll give this connection a name. So I'll just call this Google public DNS. And I'll take note of the device, which is the Ethernet card that my computer is using to access the internet. And as you can see, it's ENP0S10. So these are both the same, so it doesn't matter which one you select. And then I'll jump into my IPv4 settings. I'll change the method to automatic addresses only. And then in the DNS servers field, I'll type in the Google public DNS IP addresses, which are 8.8.8.8, and then I'll separate it with a comma with no space, and then 8.8.4.4. Cool, now if I wanted to add the IPv6 settings, then I'd just go to this page here, scroll down, and I'd enter these two addresses here, which are the IPv6 addresses. So I would firstly copy the first one, and then in the DNS field, actually I've got to go to the IPv6 settings, change the method to automatic addresses only, and then in the DNS servers field, I'll paste the first address and then put a comma in with no space, and then copy and paste the second address. Now, if I were to save this, that would be perfectly fine, but because I occasionally use Surfshark VPN on this computer, then I actually want to disable the IPv6 settings, because if I were to leave that active, then I can actually spill a bit of data as to my IP address or my locale or things like that. So I'm actually going to go to Method and select Disabled, and then save that, and there we go, my Google Public DNS has now been created. So next I actually want to create another connection, so I'll go back to Firefox and then go to the URL 1.1.1.1, and that's the website for Cloudflare. And you can either use this link to install the Warp desktop client in Linux, or, and this is my preferred method, I'll firstly maximize the window so I can see this button here, DNS, because when my page was tiled, it was hidden on the page, and then I'll tile this page back again and scroll down till I find the install instructions. So here we go, the setup on Mac. And so for the IPv4 settings, the two addresses are 1.1.1.1 and 1.0.0.1. Cool, so I'll now go into my network connections and I'll create a new connection, and this will be an Ethernet connection. Now if you wanted to create Wi-Fi connections, then you can also select Wi-Fi from here, but this connection I'm creating will be an Ethernet connection, and then I'll select create, and then for the connection name I'll change that to Cloudflare DNS. And then for the device, I'll make sure that I pick the same device, which is the Ethernet card on my computer. And then I'll go over to the IPv4 settings, and I'll change the method to automatic addresses only. And then I'll enter these addresses into the DNS servers field. So 1.1.1.1, and then comma to separate with no space, 1.0.0.1. Cool, and if I wanted to do the IPv6 settings, then I would enter these two addresses, separated by a comma with no space. But as I mentioned, I'm using a VPN, so I'm actually going to disable the IPv6 settings. So that's now disabled, and I'll save that. And now I can close out of my network connections. Cool, now to activate this, I'll go down to my network icon in my system tray, and I'll have to actually restart this. So I'll right click that, and then I'll disable enable networking, and that's now no longer connected. And then I'll go back to the network icon, right click that, and enable networking. And this is now connected to the Cloudflare DNS. So if I just check that by left clicking, as you can see, this is the Cloudflare DNS, and if I wanted to change to the Google public DNS, then I just select it like so. But I'll go back to the Cloudflare one. And if I wanted to check to make sure that I'm indeed connected to the right server, I'll just right click the network icon and then go up to connection information. And here we go, as you can see, I'm connected to Cloudflare's DNS addresses. Cool, so that is the network configuration. I can close out of there and minimize Firefox, reopen the configuration center, and next I'll go to the OpenBox settings and then go to desktops. And so currently I have 4 desktops active on this laptop. So these are the desktops here. On desktop 2 I have simple screen recorder that is recording the session, and 3 and 4 are both empty. And the shortcut to actually move between desktops is Control Alt, and then just use your left and right arrow. So there we go, back on desktop 1. But generally I'm kind of used to using just 2 desktops rather than 4. So I'll just use this down arrow and change that to 2. And now we have 2 desktops that are running on the system. So now I'll close out of there, and I can close the LXQt configuration center. So what I'm going to do now is configure my panel. So this is the panel down here at the bottom of the screen. So if I right click that and then select configure panel, that opens up the configure panel dialog, and then I'll go to widgets. And so these are all the items that I have on my panel. So starting from the left, which is the top, the application menu, that's that there. This is the desktop switcher, and then the quick launch, which are these 3 items. And then of course I have the task manager. So these are the open apps. And then on the right hand side I have removable media. So this is for ejecting USB drives or external hard drives or anything like that. Then of course the volume control, and then the system tray, which constitutes these, and then of course the world clock at the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually add a leave button to the end of my panel. So this will allow me to quickly reboot my computer or anything like that without having to go into my apps menu and then go to leave and then choosing something from here. So to add the leave button to the end of my panel, I'll go to add items and then scroll down this list till I find the quick launch. There it is there. Select that and then add widget and then close. And so all I have to do is drop the application icons there. So I'll go to my apps menu, go to leave, and then I'll click and hold and drag this over to my quick launch widget. There we go. So now I have an item in my quick launch, which is my leave button. So if I click that, now I can log out, shut down, reboot, etc. Cool, and next I'll actually move some of these items around. So for example, this desktop switcher, I'm actually going to move this to the right hand side. So I'll select it in this list, and then by pressing the down button, that actually essentially moves it right. So if I press that, you'll notice this moving across. So let's see, that's moved that, there, and there we go. So that's now on the right hand side. Cool, and that's pretty much it for the panel configuration. I'll close out of there. And the last thing I'll do is actually remove this Show Desktop launcher. So I'll just right click that and then remove Show Desktop. Cool, so that's done. So the very last thing I'm going to do on my panel is actually configure my clock. So I'll right click that, select Configure World Clock, and as you can see currently it's showing 24-hour time, but I actually want to show the date as well. So to do that, enable Advanced Manual Format. As you can see, it's already changed, and then click Customize. And in this dialog here, if I expand the page down, you'll find all of the codes that you need to configure this clock. So this is the code up here that I'm going to change. So capital H is an hour with a leading 0. So I actually want 12-hour time rather than 24-hour time. So I'm going to change it to the lowercase h, but I also want it to have no leading 0. So basically when it's a single digit, I don't want to have 0 at the start. So I'll go back up to this code here and I'll change the capital H to a single lowercase h. And then I'll go over to the seconds and I'll remove those. So I'll just remove those and then put a space in and type in AP. There we go. So now as you can see, I have a single digit with no leading 0 and PM, which will change to AM in the mornings. And as you can see here from this formatting, I have a break and then another break here. So that essentially means there's 3 lines, even though I can only see 2 lines here. So I actually don't need this third line, so I'm going to delete all of that. And you didn't actually see a difference anyway. Cool, next I'll remove the comma after the day. And I'll also increase the size. So currently the font size for the date is -2. I'm going to change that to -1. There we go, it's a bit bigger and slightly easier to see. And that's pretty much done, so I'll OK out of there. And I can now close the clock configuration. So that's the clock now configured. Cool, so what I'm going to do now is create that data partition where I can put all my media files and my working files onto, so that in the future if I reinstall Lubuntu, then I can leave that partition as is and maintain all of my working files. So if I open up my apps menu, and I'll just go to System Tools and then open the KDE Partition Manager. Here is the partition here, the 144 gigabytes that I have currently unused on my hard drive. So I'm going to turn this into a data partition and I'm going to get it to automount, but I'm not going to use the KDE Partition Manager to do that. I'll actually close that and then jump into my apps menu, go up to System Tools and then open up the Discover Software Center. And then in the search field, I'll do a search for disks. And here's the item here, disks, and even though it says disk management utility for GNOME and I'm using LXQt as my desktop environment, this actually still works. So I'll simply click install and then enter my password. And that has completed. So I can close out of Discover now and then jump into my apps menu, go up to accessories, and here is disks right there. So I'll open that and I'll just move this to the left a little bit. And then I'll select my computer hard drive, which is this one here. And here is the partition that I'm about to turn into a data partition. So I'll select it and then go to the options cog. Click that once and then select format partition, and I'll give this a name. I'll call this data, and leave everything as is. If you wanted to password protect it, you can always do that from here, but I'm just going to click next and then format. And this shouldn't take too long. There we go, that's completed. So now I'll select it and then go to the partition options cog, click that, and then select edit mount options. And what I want to do is turn off the user session defaults, so I'll switch that off, and then I'll give it a display name, so I'll call this data. And then in the mount point, I'm actually going to change the mount point, and I'll delete this just to make things a bit simpler and easier to understand, and I'll just call this data, and then click OK, enter my password, and that is done. So now what I'll do is I'll close out of the disks application and then do a reboot. So I'll see you on the other side of the reboot. Cool, so back from the reboot. So what I'll do now is I'll jump into my file browser, and here is the data partition that I just created. So what I'll do is I'll move this to the left and then open up a new file browser window, and I'll go to the data partition on this side. So what I'll do is I'll create a folder, create new folder, and I'll give it a name, so simple screen recorder recordings. There we go, and I'll change the view to the detailed list view, and then jump into the simple screen recorders folder, and then in my videos folder over here, this is where I've been recording the videos for this session. So I can easily just create a folder, and I'll call this Lubuntu config MacBook Pro, and then open that folder, and I can just drag these files straight in. So I'll copy them here, and this file here is the current session that I'm recording, so that's still being built as we speak. So that's how I use my data partition. And if I just maximize this window now, if I go back to the root of the data, and I'll actually change the preferences of my file browser, and I'll get the default view to be the detailed list view, and that way I can always see the relevant details for my files and folders. And so normally what I'd do is I'd also create a folder for my downloads. And so if I download anything from the internet, I just put it into this folder rather than my home directory, and I'll be able to create folders for my audio recordings and video files or anything like that. So that's pretty much how I use my data partition. It's kind of like an extra home directory, I guess. Cool, so I'll close out of there. Cool, so we're in the home stretch, and the final stage of this is to install a few utilities so I can easily manage my system and clean it and take snapshots, etc. So I'll jump into my apps menu and then open up my Discover Software Center. And the first utility will be Redshift. So Redshift is really cool. If I'm working at nighttime, it actually blocks the blue light, which means that when I'm working late into the night, I don't have the blue light from the screen tricking my brain into thinking that it's still daytime. So when I go to bed and try to go to sleep, then my brain is still sending me messages that no, it's still daytime, you just saw blue light. However, using Redshift will block the red light, which means that I can get a good night's sleep after working late on my computer. So I'll click install and then enter my password. And that is done, so I'll minimize Discover for a second and then jump into my apps menu, go up to accessories, and here is Redshift. So I'll click that, and then in my system tray, here is Redshift right there. So if I right click that and then select info, it's already picked up my locale, etc. So that was really easy. I'll close out of there and I'll go back to Redshift and right click it. and I can auto start it by enabling auto start here. So whenever I reboot the computer, Redshift will run in the background and kind of wait till night time before adjusting the screen depending on the time of night. But for now, I'm actually going to right click that and select quit, because I actually want a normal screen for the rest of this session, but I'll just remember to turn this on once I've finished setting all this up. So that was the first utility. I'll go back to my Discover Software Center and delete the search, and this time do a search for Stacer. So this is Stacer here. It's an absolutely brilliant system optimizer and cleaner, etc. So I'll select install, and that has completed. So I'll minimize Discover again, and I'll go back to my apps menu and then go up to accessories, and here is Stacer right there. So I'll open Stacer now. And this is an absolutely brilliant application. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go to the settings, which is down here, and I want it to start not on the dashboard but on the system cleaner, so I'll select that, and I'll also get the application just to quit when I close it rather than asking for confirmation. Cool. And then I'll go over to the cleaner tab, and then to do a clean on the system is super simple. All you have to do is select all and then click the magnifying glass, and that'll search for files that can be cleaned, and here we go. So these are all the files that will now be cleaned. So I just select all from here and then clean, and there we go. So I've recovered about 200 megabytes of system space. So System Cleaner is absolutely brilliant, and you can even manage packages and processes, and you can end processes just by selecting one and then clicking end process. And here are the services that are running. We have our resources, and this resource graph that we have in Stacer is actually fairly accurate. And if we go to the top, this is the dashboard. So it's showing how much memory is being used, how much disk space and CPU usage, etc. Cool, so that's Stacer. I'll now close out of there. And the very last application that I'm going to install is an application called Timeshift. So I'll open up my Discover Software Center and I'll delete the search, and then this time do a search for Timeshift. And here it is here. I'll now click install and then enter my password. And that has completed, so I can now close out of the Discover Software Center and then jump into my apps menu, go up to System Tools, and here is Timeshift right there. So I'll launch Timeshift. And because this is the first time I've used Timeshift on this computer, I'll go through the setup wizard. So I'll leave it on rsync because I'm not using the B-tree file system or Btrfs. So I'll just click next and then let the wizard estimate the system size. And that has completed. And if I wanted to save my snapshots to my data partition, I just select it from here and then click next. And I'll turn off the daily snapshots because I like to manually create my snapshots. Then click next. And if I maximize this window here, currently if I take a snapshot, it's only going to take a snapshot of the system settings, so everything in root. But what I want to do is actually include all of my files. So this is all of my files on my actual system, not including my data partition. So then I'll click next and then finish. So now I'm ready to create a snapshot. So before I do that, I'll actually firstly empty my trash. And it's actually saying a Timeshift file was involved there, so I'll just ignore that and I'll close out of there, and the trash is actually empty. So before I actually create my snapshot, what I'm going to do is actually remove these icons from my desktop just to make my desktop a bit cleaner. So I'll just right click that and then go to Desktop preferences, and then go over to advanced, and I can just deselect anything off the desktop. So now these are all deselected. When I click apply, there we go, that's cleaned up my desktop, and I can click OK. And now I'm ready to create a snapshot. So I'll go into my apps menu, go up to system tools, go to Timeshift, enter my password, and now I can create a snapshot. So I'll just click create, and now it's taking a snapshot of my system settings, which is absolutely brilliant. So if I want to actually return to this in the future, if I've made a mistake or if I've mucked up my system somehow by installing something that I didn't really know what I was doing and I kind of ended up with orphaned files, etc., and I want to take it back to this exact state that the computer's in now, then I'll be able to reload this snapshot. So I'll speed up this bit of the video and then rejoin you as soon as it's completed. And that's completed. So now I'll name it. So I'll just double click in the comments. So I'll give it a name. So configured. And so that whole process took just over 10 minutes to complete. It's certainly not as fast as doing a Timeshift snapshot in the B-tree file system or the Btrfs file system. However, it's still not too bad. And how I normally use Timeshift is I'll create a snapshot if I'm about to install anything that I've never installed before or make some major changes to my system. Then I'll create a snapshot in Timeshift, which will mean that I can easily, if I make any mistakes or if anything goes wrong, I can easily just return my computer back to a working state. So that's Timeshift. So I'll close out of there. And that's pretty much it. So in the next video, I'll actually theme my system, and then in the following video, I'll go through the process of installing Ubuntu Studio onto Lubuntu, and I'll also show you how you could easily configure your backend, so your jack system, so you can record sound using an external sound card. So that's coming up in the future. Thanks for watching, and please drop us a like, leave us a comment. I've been loving reading all of your comments. It's such an awesome community, and if you'd like to join the community, then just subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more coming up in the future. So until next time, I'll see you soon.